This afternoon, we're actually going to have an interesting panel separating sort of the reality and the hype around this big boom that we're seeing in artificial intelligence right now. So with us to help separate fact from fiction is Andrew Ng, who is the founder of Landing AI, as well as DeepLearning.ai, and who previously actually helped build some of the large-scale AI teams at both Google and Baidu. So actually, I just want to start, Andrew.
Sorry, there are a lot of people in the front few rows taking pictures of us. I'm not used to this.
Oh, should we?
This is very flattering.
Should we pose? I think they're just collecting training
data. I wish I
data.
was better looking or something, but thank you.
So actually, speaking of the audience, we do have a lot of C-level executives in the audience who are trying to grapple with what this big push into AI actually means for them. I know you've actually talked a lot about AI as the new electricity. Could you talk about what you mean by that, and also how do the people in this audience prepare for such a fundamental shift to their businesses?
The rise of electricity about 100 years ago transformed every industry, everything from manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, transportation. We can't even imagine how to run those industries today without electricity. And I think AI technology, similar to the rise of electricity about 100 years ago, is now mature enough for us to see a surprisingly clear path for it to transform every industry. McKinsey had a study estimating $13 trillion worth of global GDP growth, economic value creation, due to AI. One surprising thing about that is that most of this economic growth will be in sectors outside the software industry. You read about AI, you read about companies like Google, Baidu, Microsoft, and so on, and AI has transformed those industries and is continuing to advance. But what not many people realize is that the next wave will be for us to go and transform all of the other industries, everything from manufacturing, agriculture, retail, logistics, and so on. And that'll be an exciting many years ahead of work ahead of us.
Totally. And you know, in terms of the subject, this panel being around the hype of artificial intelligence, I feel like we've gone through a few years of just a lot of, I'd say almost hysteria around what this technology will bring to different industries, and you're talking about beyond even Silicon Valley and high tech. What do you feel like are some of the most misunderstood or biggest misconceptions about what AI is actually going to disrupt?
Yeah. It turns out AI is creating tremendous economic value today. It turns out 99% of the economic value it's creating today is from mainly from one type of technology called supervised learning. And that means learning input to output, or A to B mappings. For example, speech recognition works much better now than 5 years ago. That's an AI that inputs an audio clip and outputs a text transcript. Or the rise of self-driving cars. We now have an AI system that can take as input a picture of what's in front of your car and increasingly reliably tell us where are the other cars. And this technology is powering a lot of the rise of self-driving. Or the most lucrative application of this is probably online advertising. Not the most inspiring, but it actually has a big economic impact. And that's an AI component that takes as input information about an ad and some information about you, and outputs, are you going to click on this ad or not? Because by ranking ads you're more likely to click on, that drives the economics of all the online ad platforms. Outside software internet, Landing AI, we do a lot of work in manufacturing. Visual inspection, for example, rather than having dozens of people standing around looking at smartphones to see if there's a scratch on the smartphone that the factory just manufactured, we can build an AI that inputs a picture of a smartphone or whatever thing, auto component, PCB that you just manufactured, and outputs, is there a defect, is there a scratch or other dent in this? And this automates visual inspection and helps factories improve yield and improve quality. So this idea, A to B mappings, it seems so narrow, it's so limiting, but when you find the right commercial use case for it, this turns out to be enough to, I think, transform every industry.
Yeah, and with Landing AI, you talk about manufacturing. Are there other, it feels like that's one of the ones that you feel like massive breakthroughs are going to come with AI. What other verticals are you guys looking at, or different applications that you're exploring that, where's the next breakthrough coming from sort of an unexpected industry?
My friends and I used to challenge each other to name an industry that will not be transformed by AI in the next decade. I have a hard time coming up with such an industry. My best example when my friends were challenging each other was I thought, maybe the hairdressing industry. I felt I don't know how to build a robot to cut hair. Although I once said this on stage, and one of my friends, there's a robotics professor, was in the audience, and afterwards she stood up and she pointed at my head and she said, Andrew, most people's hairstyles, I couldn't get a robot to cut it, but your hair, robot could totally do that. But I think there are some industries that may be a little bit more AI ready. So industries that have gone a little bit further on the digitization path. You know, if you have computers, your data is no longer on pieces of paper, increasingly recorded in computers, those industries tend to be more ready for AI to come and eat the data and create value. But I actually find it difficult to think of a major industry where it won't have a huge impact.
Yeah. And in terms of how much, Landing AI is an example of a SaaS product where, a company would come to you and say, hey, can you help us build AI internally? For, different sized businesses, let's say you have a large enterprise versus smaller, medium size, what do you recommend in terms of building that muscle in-house versus relying on a third party like yourselves or potentially one of the larger players in the industry for their AI muscle?
Yeah. The challenging thing about AI for many industries is that it would drive strategic change. As in, to make an analogy, an earlier wave of technological disruption that's easy to understand, with the rise of the internet, we saw that a taxi company plus a website is not a true internet company. Instead, companies like Uber and Lyft are true internet companies, and that changes the core business activity of what it means to be a transportation company. They're also incumbent companies. For example, Microsoft and Apple were not internet companies. They predate the modern internet, but they transformed themselves to change a lot of their business activities to become true internet companies, and this created tremendous value. The rise of AI, I think, may be equally disruptive as the rise of the internet, and this will also change the nature of, for many businesses, what are the activities that create value? How do you build a defensible moat? Where to play, where not to play? And I think more companies, a couple of years ago, a lot of CEOs were coming to me and say, hey, Andrew, is this evil killer robot, AI going to wipe us all? I think over the last couple of years, the executive audience has matured. I get much less of that now. But, and I find that companies are getting better at thinking through the tactical projects, like if I spend $1 million on vision inspection, can I make $5 million back or whatever? But I think many companies are still struggling with the strategic repositioning of what it means when AI becomes pervasive. What are the valuable and defensible businesses in that era? And it is hard, but I hope companies can figure this out.
Well, is there any rule of thumb in terms of some of the businesses and the size and scale that they have? Because hiring this talent is so expensive these days. I remember a few years back when everyone needed a chief data science officer. Are we getting to the point where everyone in this room needs to have a chief AI officer, or will some companies just rely on outside players for that because they're too small and simply can't afford that talent?
I think the mid-sized companies, that's the hard to answer that question.
Like what scale, and is there a revenue-wise or?
Yeah. I think for the large companies, let's say market cap $1 billion and up, I think that if you have data, then AI is a huge strategic opportunity and potentially a significant strategic threat. One of the things I published several months ago was an AI transformation playbook where I talked through some of the steps I recommend to companies to adopt AI. One piece of advice is start small. If you haven't already run some pilot projects, brainstorm some projects that could be valuable for your business and run a small pilot project. I remember in the early days of Google Brain, not many people know this, but even Google way back when I was starting the team was skeptical about modern AI, about deep learning. People just did not believe in it. So my first internal customer was the Google Speech team, which, is a nice project, but it's not web search or advertising. So it's not what drives most of Google's revenues. But by my team making Google speech recognition more accurate, it helped me gain internal allies and help the company learn how to use modern deep learning. My second internal customer was Google Maps, where we use computer vision to read house numbers to more accurately place houses on Google Maps, improve the quality of map data. And it was only after those two successful internal customers that I then started a more serious conversation with the Google Ads team. So the lesson that I think is still applicable to many companies today, especially outside software internet, is it's okay to start small. Brainstorm a few projects, identify something that can deliver a quick win and execute on that and use that to gain momentum. Oh, and one other pro tip. I found talking to a lot of companies that the number one project that the CEO gets excited about, that's actually not the first project you should work on.
And actually speaking, we do have a poll of, just to gauge what challenges you're seeing in the AI landscape within your own businesses. If you just want to go to Bloomberg, STYT.com, and I think there's a button for live polling, and there should be a question about artificial intelligence. You know, in terms of some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing, your different clients sort of have to absorb with landing AI. Yeah, what's top of mind for you?
To me, number one would be scoping the right projects. It is challenging because AI technology is so complicated. It's difficult to have fine judgment on what is doable and what's not doable. So you don't set, actually, for many years, I think many automotive executives stood on stage and announced completely unrealistic roadmaps to self-driving cars. So that was overly inflated expectations. And even today, it's difficult to know what AI can and cannot do so that you don't you're not underly ambitious and say, oh, it can't do anything. And you also don't set down the path of projects impossible. So when landing AI works with customers, one of the things we spend a lot of time on is sometimes you spend a couple of days workshopping with our customers to brainstorm specific use cases. And usually before I commit significant resources to a project, I would want to brainstorm half a dozen projects, and for every project, spend sometimes a small number of weeks doing diligence to ensure that the project is technically feasible, and AI experts like my team could help with that. But then also sitting with you to make sure that the project actually creates business value as the business diligence. And it's only after the combination of technical diligence and business diligence would I feel comfortable committing resources to a project for several months to work on it.
Yeah, it does. I don't know if you see the results here. You can see them on the screen over here, but it looks like talent is the big one. I wonder, especially when you talk about some of the fields that are, like manufacturing. I know another big one that you're talking about is agriculture. Yes. I'm just curious, do you have any recommendations for the folks who are trying to hire that amazing AI engineer who might be just tempted to go work at perhaps a sexier problem at Apple or Google or Baidu, some of the places you've worked at in the past, just because that might be a tough sell saying, hey, come to work on this agriculture problem or a manufacturing problem versus some more consumer-facing dilemma?
Yeah, so through the availability of machine learning engineering talent is still insufficient, but it's actually getting a little bit better than before. Coursera has started with my machine learning course, and that course has reached, plus the new deep learning specialization offered by Deep Learning AI, we've reached about 3 million people around the world, and so there is a growing workforce that is highly motivated. A lot of them spend their spare time working really hard on evenings and weekends to study this stuff. So there is a growing workforce that is skilled and excited about working on these problems. I think the scarcity, the thing that you just cannot find, really hard to find, is the AI architect, or the AI strategist that can come in, look at your business, and find the custom use cases that are valuable for your business. I've worked on online ads, right, for some time. It's not the most inspiring thing, but it's really lucrative for some companies. And I've seen the crazy amount of customization that the large online ad platforms do, from very custom models to custom hardware to data centers with custom networking to shave off several milliseconds for how fast we can serve you ads. So the advertising industry has found it very valuable to do deep customization of machine learning, data centers, everything to drive the economics. The advertising industry is only a small part of our economy. I think other parts of the economy are much bigger. And over the next decade, one thing I don't think people fully appreciate yet is the amount of work it will take to take AI and build highly custom solutions for manufacturing, agriculture, transportation, logistics, and all of these other industries. And it will not just be downloading an open source thing off GitHub, because there's a lot of customization that will be very valuable for all of these industries. Right. In terms of finding the talent, I think there's often the usual, build versus buy. At Landing AI, one of the things we do is we act as some of our customers' outsourced chief AI officer, where for outsource some of the work to us, we can help build a team, provide training, and our model is to build AI systems for you while also teaching you how to build AI systems so that after a couple of years, you can re-insource the AI function and then hopefully become an AI-enabled business in your vertical.
And just in one more minute, I want to open up to questions. We have a couple more minutes. I think there might be mics floating around. If you want to throw your hands up, we can come find you. But Andrew, just to zoom out toward the end of this discussion and talk some of the bigger trends going on, there was a fascinating discussion just a month or two ago between Elon Musk and Jack Ma, which really demonstrated some of the hype and almost fear around some of these technologies and the disruption they'll bring to society. Jack Ma was very optimistic. He thinks it's going to improve lives, whereas Elon Musk is very apocalyptic. He really thinks this is bringing the doom for society. Where do you land on that debate? It seems like you're more on the optimistic side, but walk me through that.
I think that I think the biggest challenge of AI is that it is creating a concentration of power. And I think with the last technological disruption, the rise of the internet, we created tremendous wealth, but it was very concentrated. A lot of that wealth was concentrated in a few hubs, Silicon Valley and Beijing, and frankly, to some extent, New York as well. With the rise of AI, we will create tremendous wealth. I think it's really clear, but I would love for it to be more fairly shared this time. One of the challenges that the internet and AI creates for society is that it's causing more industries to become winner take most or winner take all. And for example, take farming. It used to have a pretty decent life being a farmer, right? Sell farms, raise chicken, raise crops, sell your crops. But with the rise of the internet, this allows centralized players, including everything from John Deere, Monsanto, Tyson Chicken, no affiliation of any of them, to be able to use IoT, satellite imagery, collect data, centralize it, process the data, and then spread conclusions back out to all of these farms to help them optimize yield, optimize how you farm your chickens, or spread out technology from farming technology to DNA technology or whatever. And so the centralized players, because the internet lets you aggregate all this farming data from across the nation, and then AI lets you process this data, the pendulum is swinging in the direction of centralized players being most efficient. And because tech has infected every industry, we are causing many industries, not just software internet, to have these winner-take-most or winner-take-all dynamics. For businesses, this creates a lot of pressure to make sure that you are the one, right, to be a little bit ahead of the others and capture the positive feedback loops and maybe be one of the companies that thrive in your industry. And the race is on in many industries between incumbents as well as the startup disruptors. So I think the winner-take-all positive feedback loop dynamics in many industries means that I see CEOs face a lot of pressure because by the time a startup disruptor, it has gotten traction, it may be too late. So from the corporate level, I think that's a big challenge. From societal level, I think the challenge is how to make sure that the wealth we create, if we're creating natural monopolies in many more industry verticals, how to make sure that the wealth we create is fairly shared.
And are there any questions in the room? I don't know if we have mics floating around. Sorry, it's hard to see with the lights. Here we go. I don't know. Is there a mic, or if you just want to yell? I don't know what the... we can...
Thank you. Henry An with HHN Capital. So Andrew, we talked briefly earlier. When you look at China has made a lot of progress in AI. That's one of their key technology. If you have to make a prediction in about 10 years out, do you think we're going to be, as a country, US will be leading the AI in terms of applications, or you think China will be leading it? Because we're running in sort of parallel path, but both countries are making a lot of progress. So in essence, US or China, and the rationale for your basis in terms of your response. Thank you.
I think how fast different countries advance, it is up to us. It's up to all of you. It's up to all of us to determine our fate. Sometimes the US-China relations is posed as a competition in AI, and I think that's not the most useful framing. With the rise of electricity, we saw that many nations around the world now have great electric grids. I'm very happy that when I travel to Colombia, where I have a team, that Colombia has a great electric grid. When I travel to Singapore, they have a great electric grid. China has a strong electric grid. And I think that all of the electricity operators around the world can learn from each other. So electricity and AI is not a zero-sum game. And by lifting up the whole world, we could actually all learn from each other. Because the US having a strong electric grid, although I actually live in California, our electric grid is not doing so well these weeks. But the fact that the US has a strong electric grid, it doesn't make anyone else's electric grid any worse off.
But we just have 45 seconds left, but I wonder rather if you don't think that's a useful framework in terms of the competition, between China and the US. Having worked at Baidu in China as well as Google, two of the sort of titans and powerhouses of AI, does one culture sort of have a competitive advantage in terms of the US and China, having worked in both sides?
I think each country has unique advantages, and I think both countries should, actually, not just US and China, I think all nations around the world should learn from each other. I have a team in Colombia as well, which I think may be poised to be a leading AI powerhouse of Latin America in the future. And for the wealth we create to be fairly shared, I actually hope that there will be more hubs of AI than just Silicon Valley and Beijing. Silicon Valley and Beijing are now significantly ahead of all the cities. I would say London, is actually relatively distant third, and Canada is also maybe somewhere in the mix. But because AI technology is still so immature, there's still a very good chance for almost any city, almost any country to become a future leading AI hub. And smart government action, investment in education, building business-friendly environments, I think all of those, and building community, we need to work on this together. We're actually really stronger together. Will all be keys to making sure that we could build multiple AI hubs, hopefully New York as well.
Well, great. We'll have to leave it there. We're out of time, but please join me in thanking Andrew Ng.